safe after a recent United States Supreme Court ruling which could lead to the release of dangerous murderers. In Iowa, the sentence for those convicted of first-degree murder is life in prison without parole. However, in the Miller versus Alabama United States Supreme Court decision, the court ruled that states cannot mandate life sentences without the possibility of parole for murderers who commit their crimes before the age of 18. Now, after the court's ruling, up to 38 dangerous juvenile murderers in Iowa will seek resentencing and more lenient sentences. During this process, the victims, several of whom join me today, are all too often forgotten people in our juvenile justice system, in our criminal justice system generally. And they'll have to relive the pain of the tragedies. These victims have had their loved ones violently taken away from them. I take this action today to protect these victims, their loved ones' memories, and protect the safety of all Iowans. Today, I will take action to keep first-degree murderers locked up for at least 60 years. As governor, I have the constitutional responsibility for commutations. The Iowa Constitution gives the governor broad discretionary power with regard to commutations. I also have the responsibility of looking out for the safety and well-being of all Iowa citizens. In compliance with the United States Supreme Court decision, I will commute the life without parole sentences today to life with parole only after 60 years for 38 people who were convicted of first-degree murder while a juvenile. This means they will not have the possibility of parole until they have served 60 years. Justice is a balance, and these commutations ensure that justice is balanced with the punishment for those who have committed these vicious crimes and also protecting the public safety of Iowa citizens. First-degree murder is an intentional and premeditated crime, and those who are found guilty are dangerous and should be kept off our streets and out of our communities. And now I'm pleased to turn over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Governor. Today, Governor Branstad and I want to ensure that justice is served, Iowans are protected, and victims are heard. Victims can never be forgotten from the process. Victims must also never be re-victimized. This blanket commutation by the governor ensures a minimum of 60 years before any juvenile convicted of murder in the first degree will become eligible for parole. This gives the opportunity for parole in compliance with the recent Supreme Court decision. However, the action also protects victims from having to be re-victimized each year by worrying about whether the parole board will release the murderer who killed their loved ones. I would like to thank Brenda Bash from the Polk County Crisis and Advocacy Services, as well as the various family members of 3 victims who were violently murdered: Stephen Margaret Dreyhouse, Kathleen Smith, and Robin and Mandy Myers, for being here with us today. Victim advocates and victim family members continue to do great work by standing up for those who cannot stand for themselves and speaking for those without voices. I also, at this point, would like to invite Brenda to the podium, and Brenda will give us a report on one of the victims.
Good morning. I would like to thank Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds for their support of victims of violence. Today, I want to emphasize how important it is that we acknowledge the experiences of those whose loved ones were murdered. These survivors are suddenly and violently thrust into an unfamiliar criminal justice system in which they have little control and precious few rights. Yet they endure. They show up day after day, hearing after hearing, appeal after appeal, and to events like today, to fulfill a promise. It is a promise to their parent, sibling, grandparent, child, that although they are gone, they will never be forgotten. They stand to give voice to the silenced. They remind us that each life is precious. When the evidence is in, the verdict is reached, and sentence dispatched, a milestone is reached. A page is turned. From this point, families continue the rebuilding of their lives around nearly insurmountable loss. Each time they are brought back to the criminal justice system, it cracks this fragile foundation. Wounds that have begun to heal are again torn open as they relive traumatic events that shattered the life they knew. As members of their communities, we are charged with supporting them and hearing through them the far-reaching impact that these crimes had. It is only when they feel safe can they eventually find healing hope. Hope that the world is not a dangerous place and that accountability and personal responsibility are values still held sacred. We must learn from these experiences of those who have suffered most so that they know that while their loved one is gone, we have not forgotten. I would like to share with you a story of a victim. It is one shared by many. My name is Paul Wells. I am a brother to Greg Wells, who was murdered by DJ Keegan and Brandy Bird on January 6, 2002. On January 5th of that year, Keegan ordered pizza to his apartment in Marion, Iowa, and my brother was the unfortunate driver assigned to deliver their order. For no other reason than he was the individual who answered their call, Greg was attacked and murdered by Keegan and Bird at Keegan's apartment. They then stole his car. For these crimes, Keegan and Bird were both sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. January 6, 2002 was the worst day of my life. On that day, I had to identify the bloody and lifeless body of my brother Greg, who had been murdered earlier that day by Keegan and Bird. Compared to that, seeing the impact of my brother's homicide on my parents, sister, and other family members was even worse. Our lives were devastated. Greg was one of the kindest, gentlest, and caring individuals one could know. To have him die in such a cruel and uncaring manner was horrible. Our pain did not end that day. In the following months and years, we had to endure a trial and sentencing hearing for both Keegan and Bird, 4 total processes. Sitting through these processes was cruel in itself, and each time our wounds were reopened, and we again had to relive the awful events of early 2002. As we recently passed the 10th anniversary of the murder, my sister and I were finally feeling as if we had, in some small ways, moved beyond the ugly events of the past. We'd found ways to cope with the earlier trauma, and had found some solace in the fact that the murderers of our brother were in prison forever. The recent ruling by the Supreme Court has now reopened these old wounds as we contemplate the possibility that Keegan may, in the future, be allowed freedom. 5 members of the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was cruel and unusual for state laws to require juveniles convicted of murder to be sentenced to life in prison without possibility of release. What I find cruel and unusual is for families, such as ours, to be forced to relive the ugly events of the past. Keegan was 17 years, 11 months, and 8 days old on the day of the crime, literally only weeks from being 18, the age of adulthood, according to the Supreme Court ruling. Additionally, at the time of the murder, Keegan was in a juvenile program that allowed him to live on his own in an apartment while he held a job at a local restaurant and went to school. In fact, it was in Keegan's apartment where the murder occurred. At the time, the state considered Keegan mature enough to live on his own. Therefore, he would have been mature enough to understand the issues of life, death, loss, and pain. Finally, it was Keegan's intent to murder whoever showed up at his door that night. Based on testimony heard at Keegan and Bird's trials, while Bird also struck blows to my brother, Keegan also took the hammer and struck Greg multiple times, delivering sufficient blows to take his life. Then, while my brother lay dying, it was Keegan who collected a steak knife from his kitchen drawer and administered a final act of murder by cutting Greg's throat. It has now been over 10 years since the night of the murder, and Keegan is now 28 years old. In the past decade, he has never reached out to our family to express any sorrow or remorse. To our knowledge, he has never admitted what he did was wrong or indicated in any way he was sorry for his actions. This would also indicate that he is in no way deserving of parole. This statement would not be complete without saying more about my brother Greg. He was a wonderful and caring individual. He was the kind that was always there for his family and friends, whether they lived 4 minutes or 4 hours away. Additionally, prior to his murder, he was a role model, mentor, and friend to the young 8-year-old son of his girlfriend. He was loved by many, and there remains a hole in our lives today because of his absence. Let me close by saying we have suffered enough. Someone we love dearly is gone, cruelly taken by another. Any action that can be taken to reduce the continued impact of this crime on us in the future is appreciated. Thank you.
any of the, anyone else want to speak? Okay. We would open it to your questions.
Brenda, what's your name? And who are you with?
Brenda Bash, and the supervisor at Polk County Crisis and Advocacy.
BASH?
Yes, sir.
Governor, does with the 60-year sentence, do those start now, or do people get credit for time served, or how does that work?
Well, this is a 60-year minimum. So obviously they get credit for the time they've already served, but it would be 60 years from the time they were sentenced.
It's still a life sentence, they just can't come up for parole
Right.
for a minimum of
Right.
60 years.
Yeah, so it's still a life sentence, but it's not a mandatory life sentence. It now has 60 years, which means they would be in their 70s before they would become eligible for parole.
Just to clarify that, inmates, as you know, in Iowa's prison systems, the day that they enter prison, their sentence is cut in half.
Exactly.
So does that mean that they could,
No.
you're saying
No.
that?
Now, that's the reason why we made it life instead of 99 years. If we made it, we considered 99 years, if we made it 99 years, they'd be eligible, they would be done with their sentence in 45 years.
Okay,
So this is still a life sentence, but it's not a mandatory life. That's the difference. It's a life sentence, but they're not eligible for parole until 60 years. Because you're right about that.
okay.
Otherwise, they would be otherwise, after 45 years, they would have completed their sentence, and they could actually go out without even supervision. And we think that would be a worse situation. And that's the reason why we chose to make this a life sentence with serving 60 years before they become eligible for parole.
Legislators had considered addressing this. Had you indicated to them that you wanted to do this instead?
Well, first of all, legislators can prospectively address this, and we will recommend the legislature change the law. Present Iowa law is a mandatory life sentence for first-degree murder. And because of the Supreme Court decision, we're going to recommend that they do similarly and change the law to make it a life sentence, but eligible for parole after 60 years. But this is for the 38 that have previously been convicted that can request for resentencing. The legislature doesn't, really can't affect that.
Wasn't there a case last week in the court system dealing with this issue?
There was, I think, 2 cases before the Court of Appeals where the court basically said that the Supreme Court decision would indeed mean that those convicted were eligible to have their sentencing to be resentenced. This changes that because I have, by executive action, using executive clemency, changed that from a mandatory life to life with the possibility of parole after 60 years. And that restores certainty. Otherwise, you'd have all these cases and all the questions as to what's going to happen with all these resentencings.
And just to be clear then, your action deals with those 2 individuals involved in those 2 cases?
It not only deals with those 2, it
Right.
deals with all 38, including those 2, yes.
Do you know what the age range is for the 38 people?
Well, the time of conviction, I think you have to be at least 14 to be tried as an adult. So it would be from 14 to 18. As you heard, one of the perpetrators was just a few days short of being 18. So that would mean they would be in that range from 14 to 18.
But the 38 people, their current ages are?
Well, it all depends, well, that depends upon, each of them has their own age, obviously, and it depends upon when they were convicted, how long they've served, and whatever. But at the time they were convicted, I would say at the time the crime was committed, they were between 14 and 18 in order to be in this category. As you know, the Supreme Court decision does not affect those people that are over age 18. We have, for Iowa, a long time had a mandatory life sentence for the most serious crime, which is first-degree murder. And this applies to first-degree murder by juveniles, And first the court had to decide to try them as an adult because of the heinousness of the crime and because of the situation. And then for them to have been convicted beyond a reasonable doubt and sentenced then under the Iowa law to mandatory. But now that has been invalidated by the court, and through this executive action, we are changing that sentence to life with the possibility of parole after 60 years.
Have you actually signed this today then?
I am doing this today, yes.
Okay.
And there will be 38 individual commutations. I'm signing an executive order on this blanket commutation. I'm signing 38 individual commutations. We've consulted with the Attorney General's office and the Criminal Appeals Division, and the people in the Attorney General's office are supportive of this action.
By your action, it seems that you're saying prison is more punitive than rehabilitative.
First degree murder. Remember, we're not talking about just, you know, our prison system, and John Baldwin is here from Corrections, and Doris Kelly is here from the Parole Board, but yeah, we certainly, for those people convicted of lesser offenses, we hope can be rehabilitated, but we're talking about the most heinous, the most serious, premeditated crime, first degree murder. And in those cases, it's been the Iowa law for a long, long time that it is mandatory life sentence. The governor does have commutation powers. I have commuted a couple of sentences in the past. Other governors have. So I am using that power granted by the Constitution to the governor to commute those terms as a result of the court decision from mandatory life to life with the possibility of parole after 60 years. I think that is the correct balance of justice and protecting the safety of the citizens, and also being cognizant of the impact this has on the families of the victims.
For the sisters?
Just, are all of you victims in support of this, including Polk County Advocacy?
Yes.
You all support this? You all think it's a good idea?
Yes.
We did consult with many other victims that aren't here as well. We also talked to a number of county attorneys. We talked to the Attorney General's office, and generally we found there was a lot of concern, uncertainty, and this is designed to try to restore some predictability and stability and certainty to the situation for the victims as well as for the public. And for that matter, for the prosecutors and the people that have to, criminal defendants, the people in the criminal prosecutions area.
For the sisters, obviously we followed your case here recently. Would one of you care to talk about why this will make a difference to you, knowing that he's not going to be able to get out?
I'd like to add, it's up to each victim whether they choose to answer any questions. If they don't want to, we made it clear they don't need to answer any questions. So they're here today, and it's up to them if they would choose to answer a question.
Mandy Myers, can you repeat the question, please?
I'm just wondering, you know, everybody, the whole state watched your families go through your recent trial here, and I'm curious, just hearing this announcement for the governor, what this brings your family knowing this.
We are grateful that it has been amended to this. We were worried that there was a possibility of parole, and we didn't want that. So we were happy to hear that this was going to be the change. Myself personally, I can't speak for my sister and my father, but that's how I feel.
Well, that's a very painful thing for these families, and I just want to thank the victim families that have joined us. It takes a lot of courage to do this. They've been through a very difficult time, and we respect that, and we've tried to be very careful in the way this has been done. But we think this is the right action to take to restore the balance of justice that's needed. Any other questions on this subject? Okay. You can go and take another, take the chair. Yeah, take a chair. We'll be glad to answer questions on other matters as well.
Governor, could I just ask you a political question? Did you know Governor Romney has been talking about vice presidential candidates? Are you being vetted to be a vice presidential candidate?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. I mean, on my focus.
Are you?
Well, no, I think that'd be inappropriate for me to comment on it. I ran for governor of Iowa because I want to serve the people of this state. I have not expressed any interest in that. I'm interested in helping Governor Romney be elected president. I think we need a change in leadership. I think it's pathetic that the President of the United States is spending all his time attacking other people and casting blame instead of providing leadership. So I'm going to try to do all I can to help him.
Apparently there was a guard attack in the Anamosa prison recently, and the State Employees Union has raised some concerns about staffing levels and about how that incident was handled in terms of the inmate who made the attack.
Well, we have John Baldwin here and also Doris Kelly from the Full Board. Now, let me just say this. I'm really pleased with the progress that's been made with corrections and the Full Board working very closely together. We've significantly reduced the inmate population over the last several months, and we believe that really significant progress has been made there in terms of reducing some of the overcrowding, and that corrections has done a good job of trying to address these issues. John, I don't know if there's anything more you want to add.
If so,
That was fine. I was fine.
Okay.
so if an inmate attacks a guard, is there retribution internally?
Absolutely. If somebody that's in prison attacks another inmate or attacks a correction officer, there are consequences for that, and they can indeed see their sentence increased. So that's right. There are reward. He talked about in the question about they automatically get this good and honor time, which cuts their term in half. Well, they can lose that if they are violent and attack corrections officers or other inmates while they are in prison.
So according to this account, that there was no punishment for this inmate, so that account is incorrect?
John, can you respond to that?
Thank you.
Good morning.
Why don't you come over here?
The issue at Anamosa, he was, after he assaulted the correctional officer, he was confined to his room, or his cell, I'm sorry, and he was put on a disciplinary status. Well, while we reviewed the facts of the case and sorted out exactly what happened to provoke this offender from attacking one of our staff. And we did that, and he remained in disciplinary status through this weekend. This morning, he has been moved to a disciplinary cell based on the investigation. We go through this every single time and react to the circumstances. Each circumstance in the Department of Corrections, when an act of this type is present, we look at very carefully, we take very seriously, and we make judgments based on the facts as they happen. And that's what happened in this particular case.
In Danny Homan's statement, he's putting the future safety of the men and women who work there in you two gentlemen's hands, saying that because of staffing levels, you're putting them at risk. Do you agree with that?
Let me respond very clearly to that. Corrections is a risk industry. If you come to work for us and you do not believe that you will be immune from risk, you're in the wrong job. Our job is to train our staff, the ones we have, to be the best correctional officers, the best cooks, the best nurses, the best translators we can, and make sure we enable them to deal with situations as they arise. We cannot control every little thing. On the positive side, this governor, in the last 2 years, has put money in the Department of Corrections so that we can maintain our current staffing levels. Anamosa has 317 staff as of last Friday. That's the most Anamosa's had since '09. And they have 5 more correctional officers they're hiring within the next couple of weeks. We've lived for a long time with decreasing staff. Now we're starting to stabilize and add a couple staff back. We're very pleased for that. Nothing will stop an offender from attacking somebody if they're bound and determined to. Our job is to make sure that opportunity is greatly decreased day after day after day. The staff at corrections do a sensational job. They work so hard, I can't tell you, and I'm so proud of them. They do a wonderful job. And I think to continually harp on this topic increases their likelihood of some issues. Our staff do a great job, as demonstrated by all of the data that is out there, and we hope to continue that.
Are they sufficiently staffed?
Pardon?
In your mind, is that prison sufficiently staffed or not?
No one can answer that question simply because what is that magic number? If you're dealing with 1,085 people, what is that magic number? They are staffed with the budget we have, and the budget allows for increases. We're happy about that. We've always dealt with, and always will, every system, not just Iowa, but every other state, deals with what we have. And that's what we're coping with, and our staff are doing a great job. Just a great job.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Governor.
I would also say, what is the inmate population today compared to what it was?
It's 8,344 as of midnight, and in April of 2011, it was 9,009.
So we made a dramatic reduction. I give a lot of credit to the Pro Board and under Doris's leadership. They've done a great job of reviewing and determining who are the best risks. Because we don't want to be releasing violent, dangerous people like the ones we're talking about here, but we do want those that we feel have been rehabilitated that are good risk. So that's the balance, and we're very proud of both the work of the Corrections Department and the Pro Board.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.